Hello and welcome to Pain in the Podcass, your place to find out everything you've ever wanted to know about pain. My name's Dr. Joseph Parsons, and I'm joined by the wonderful Dr. Joshua Craw and Don Wijasoria. And today, we're talking about PTSD. Welcome in. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Pain in the Podcass, and today we are talking about post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. But before we jump into this, let's start with our facts and learnings about ourselves. So, Don, what's a fact about you that people on this podcast have not heard yet?
This is really boring. Hello everyone. That's not the boring part. The boring part is my fact, which is I subscribe to the notion of tidy room, tidy mind. It's my main, just like tidying things up, doing the laundry, like any of those really mundane tasks is my form of procrastination.
I could not agree more. Once the room is tidy, it's just one thing off your plate. That means you can focus on things that are more valuable.
Because otherwise I just stare at that pile of laundry in the corner and I don't do any work.
How clean is your room currently?
Not very, because Josh is staying in it.
I do not condone tidy mind, tidy room, whatever it is.
You don't condone it?
No, I don't.
It's not even that you don't agree with it, you actively disagree.
Yeah, I like to make a nest.
What's your nest made from?
Dirty clothes and two pairs of shoes.
Oh my God.
As listeners of the podcast will know, Josh only ever has two pairs of the shoes on the hook at once. That's one fact about you, Josh. What's another fact about you?
I'm caffeine dependent at this point, I feel like.
Okay.
Yeah, I was realising this week how much caffeine I actually drink.
What's your liquid consumption so far today?
A giant mug of coffee, which I actually put through the French press twice to get double the amount of beans through it.
Make it make sense.
A can of Pepsi Max.
Which has caffeine?
Yeah, of course it does. It's about a third of a cup of coffee.
And has it made you feel any more awake?
No, it's making my heart beat quite fast, though.
Listeners will have noticed that he did not say water at any point.
No.
Like, regularly, I'll have 8 cans of Pepsi Max and 3 coffees a day. That's usually my...
I think at this point you're just hydrophobic. Aquaphobic.
I like that.
I don't know why I said it in Spanish.
Aquaphobic.
Agua. Yeah, I've literally got stock in Pepsi now.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier on. I feel like this is a thing that... I know what people have always invested in the stock market, but I feel like average people investing in the stock market now is just a thing that never existed 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I still haven't, but I will eventually, maybe.
You
one
need
day.
to.
I should. To be fair, your return on investment is impressing me quite a lot. It makes me feel that my financial situation could really do with some stock in Pepsi.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow, your ROI is getting him quite turned on.
It is.
It's getting him very wet.
Right turned on.
It's getting him wet, unlike my hydration status. How about you, Joe? Tell me something about you.
A fact about me is that I had a 99% loss rate playing my granny at Scrabble, despite the fact that she had really quite advanced dementia.
Well, you could have just told her that you won.
Wow. No, the one sort of faculty that she really retained, even to the point where she no longer really remembered me without a lot of prompting and pictures and whatever,
Was vicious mockery of your loss.
She was phenomenal at Scrabble, and I mean, like, in a 2-player game of Scrabble would frequently score sort of like 300 points. She was playing the game like she was playing it like chess. She was like moves in advance about thinking about how she could set up herself in the future to hit certain like triple word scores or whatever. She was
Damn.
phenomenal.
I would have no chance.
Oh yeah, no, Marjorie would have absolutely wrecked you. Yeah. What's the best Scrabble word you've ever got?
I can't remember the last time I played Scrabble. I played Bananagrams.
Oh yeah.
And I was shit at that.
Were you?
Yeah, I mean, you were there.
Oh yeah, so I was.
Well, I played Scrabble a fair bit with my mum, but Wordle's more my speed.
Oh, is it? I wonder why you've managed to shoehorn this into the episode, Josh.
I managed to get Wordle in one for the first time after 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, wasn't it like your 1700th Wordle or something?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah? And you got it with the word
Was
hoist.
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 Is that your go-to starter word?
Not anymore because I'm in a very competitive Wordle WhatsApp group. with
No fucking
my
way.
sister, my nephew, and my mum.
Oh,
And it's not going to happen twice. Surely you can't double hoist.
Yeah, so they now know my starting word, so I have to change it.
What's your starting word, Don?
I think I used audio
Oh, I like
that's not
audio.
bad.
That's a great
or
one.
field.
Also great. I do steal, STEAL, or pious,
How do you spell pious?
PIOUS.
Oh.
My mum goes for a Jew.
Ah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay,
Don, what have you
so-
learned about yourself this week?
Felt like I was just in a Reddit forum about Wordle. I've learned that I might have a touch of OCD when it comes to lids in cupboards and drawers, particularly loose lids,
Like pan lids or Tupperware lids?
like
or?
Tupperware lids.
Okay.
And pan lids. Oh my god, pan lids annoy me. They need to be stacked. Yeah.
Oh.
Vertically.
Oh, I just don't have any deep enough drawers.
That's why you only get like one type of pan, so that they all match.
No.
Yes.
Well, there we go. That was a lovely discourse. Yeah, I don't do that. I should, but I don't.
Like-
Also, sorry, people who store their Tupperwares without the lids on, psychotic.
What? It takes up so much space.
Don't care. Because there is somewhere on this earth where someone is hoarding all of the bits of Tupperware that you've lost. It doesn't matter how well you store it, doesn't matter whether you store it with lid on, lid off, whatever, you will lose at least one lid or bottom of a Tupperware. Everyone
Every
has
day.
one. Yeah, exactly. It's
You
like,
guys are weird.
have you never
What
lost,
are you doing with your Tupperware?
Have you never got like half a Tupperware left and you just can't find the
Not
other
through
side?
my own doing. It's
How
always
do you
been.
know, though?
It's always been other people. Like my mum messes it up all the time.
It's not going to mess it up. I have to now store them together because I would just have random bits go missing. And then I'd have loads of part Tupperwares that didn't fit each other.
Is Dee a Tupperware kleptomaniac?
I don't know, possibly. But this was happening before we were together, so I don't...
She's built a cellar in their house full of Tupperware lids.
She's burrowed through the concrete foundations. Dear. Right, Josh.
So my learning this week is that home is where the heart is.
Ew.
Ah.
I really want to move away from Essex. Please let me move.
For any listeners from Essex, we apologise.
I do not apologise. You don't understand my accent.
I've seen too much fake tan.
Where do people think you're from when you say where you're from?
Yeah, people. Well, 'cause
Wait,
I've
let me. Let's do a little role play.
got-
Hi, Josh. Where are you from? No, wait,
That's a
what's
terrible
that?
Essex
That's
accent.
terrible. I can't do an Essex accent.
Just try.
Remind me of it.
Nope. I just want to see what your brain goes to.
No, I genuinely can't. I can't even remember it. Who's from Essex? Who's from Essex?
Joey Essex.
Joey Essex. Is he from Essex?
Probably.
I thought he was from Chelsea. I don't know. All right, no, that's not.
That's the West
not
Country.
Right. Hi, Josh. Nice to meet you. Where are you from? That's
New York.
fantastic. New York.
No,
That's
near
a
York.
long way. New York.
Yeah, they just don't get my accent.
Okay.
It'd be nice to move back home.
Fingers firmly crossed. Josh will join us back in the north. I say join us. Join me.
Yeah, Don, you can move back up north as well.
I would.
Escape the
I'm
terror that
thinking
is
about
London.
it. I'm on the fence.
He's in the Midlands
I'm in
currently.
the middle.
And then last but not least, my learning this week.
I feel like we always forget to ask Joe about his learnings and facts.
Yeah, he's very mean, isn't he?
I already know everything about Joe, so I mean, yeah.
Well, do you know that recently I've really found journaling beneficial? Yeah, so I have always sort of balked at the idea of journaling, and I never really thought it would be something that I would engage well with, but actually I've started doing... Basically, I'll write a small entry about my day whenever I feel like I have something that I want to remember, positive or negative, and then it just helps me to kind of have a bit of a chance to reflect and see how things have been. And I think I'm definitely guilty of catastrophizing, and so if I have a bad day, I'll feel like my recent life must have been bad. I'll be like, if it's a bad day, I'll be like, the last month must have been really stressful, da 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 da. But actually looking back in the journal, I can look back and see the highs and lows.
And it's all lows.
And it's just all so low. No, it's a good mix.
Welcome to the NHS.
Exactly. But, you know, it is nice to be able to look back. And also in there, I keep a list obviously not with patient identifiers in, but I keep a little bit of a list of all the patients who I feel I've genuinely made a massive impact in their life. So it's not many, it's like a handful, but patients where you can really see that you've changed that person's outcomes directly because of your efforts. And it's really nice to be able to look back on a bad day and think,
Yeah.
I did something.
That's
really
really
nice.
cool. It's like the opposite of the anime Death Note. So today we're going to be talking about PTSD. I feel like a trigger warning is needed for this episode. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you are sensitive to anything that we are potentially going to be discussing, not that you already know what we're going to be discussing, but
if you have potentially experienced sort of major trauma, there will be discussions about different types of traumatic incidences that people can experience and the impacts that this can have. So just for people to be aware prior to starting the episode.
So, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or complex PTSD, is a condition that can develop after experiencing or witnessing a traumatic, distressing, or frightening event, and this includes serious injury. Individuals with PTSD can often relive the traumatic event through nightmares or flashbacks in their minds, and this is something that we'll get onto later on in the episode. They can also feel isolated, irritable, and feel guilt, which can lead to further mental health challenges.
I think the mention of flashbacks is particularly interesting. I think we've all seen sort of like TV and film and documentaries, and people will talk about like Vietnam flashbacks, and it's also almost become a meme in itself where people will kind of like joke about having a Vietnam flashback about something. But actually, I think that's one of the things that, at least from my knowledge, brought PTSD a lot more into the public conscience. I know, like, obviously there was people would talk about like shell shock and things in the First World War, and there were similar things in World War II. But I think the modern understanding of PTSD, as far as I'm aware, seems to have come a lot from that kind of Vietnam veteran experience.
Yeah, because I mean, it's typically a very traumatic event which triggers or puts somebody along the path of developing PTSD. And if you've gone through a war, you've almost invariably seen things that are quite traumatic.
Yeah. Does it happen straight away? I'm not sure about how it onsets.
Well, I can tell you about the diagnostic criteria for PTSD, if that might sort of help us build a sort of understanding of things.
Yeah.
And as a doctor, I like criteria. So the DSM-5, for example, is one of the most up-to-date, as we're recording it, diagnostic manuals for psychological conditions. And what they say is that your symptoms need to be affecting you for at least 1 month. Okay. Otherwise, it could be an acute sort of stress response as opposed to post-traumatic stress disorder. They need to have then these 4 criteria, which is, so 1 month of re-experiencing, so flashbacks, avoidant behaviour. So, for example, let's say that using a car crash, you're now avoiding cars, for example.
Yeah.
That would be like avoidance. Or you're avoiding specific areas of a city if you had a traumatic experience there.
Or if you've been in the war and it's bonfire night, for example, and there's fireworks, you might put headphones on, sort of hide away in your house so you're not hearing the sound of like loud explosions, for example.
Yeah. Something along those lines, yeah. Also, negative alterations in mood or cognition. So becoming angry, becoming quite depressed, that sort of thing. And finally, hyperarousal or reactivity. So that being really hyper aware of your surroundings and like...
Yeah.
Interesting about the hyperarousal, like being so aware, because obviously, like PTSD, a lot of people talk about it affecting sleep quality, so they'll have recurrent nightmares. And so often with PTSD, people have insomnia, and so it can be really difficult for them to maintain concentration. And I think a lot of people with other chronic pain conditions will recognise like a similar thing here, is that their body's in that constant fight or flight state, and so they feel very aware of what's going on around them, but they've also got that brain fog, which almost makes them very unaware of what's going on around them. It's this weird kind of... dichotomy that exists at the same time but feels counterintuitive. It feels a bit paradoxical.
Yeah, it's like you're really hyper-focused but also not focused on the other things happening. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't actually have the link for this or the reference, but I remember reading an article once where it was talking about facial recognition in people with PTSD. And actually people who suffer from PTSD, when they see neutral faces, may see those neutral faces as aggressive. Mm. So, for example, if you're a war veteran and you're walking down the street and somebody looks at you, they may have a neutral face because they're just looking through you, but you might see it as an aggressive, like, facial expression, and then that can trigger sort of feelings of fight or flight.
I mean, sometimes you see that all the time in London.
Oh, my
People's
God,
resting
yeah.
bitch faces on the tube. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be hell, wouldn't it?
It's, yeah. Violence ensues.
And especially mine. Like, I've been told I've got like a death stare.
Do it. Yeah, I feel very unsafe.
Safe.
just not safe. Yeah.
For Patreon users, you can see my death stare.
Or visit the Instagram account.
He's not always doing the death.
Always.
No, but we can take a picture of it.
Actually,
I
no.
get
If you
Out in the wild.
subscribe to the Patreon, you don't get the death stare. You get the.
Eee, happy stare.
Josh is smiling for context because this is an audio format. Don, at the beginning of the episode, you said PTSD and then you said complex PTSD. What's the difference?
So I've already talked about like the criteria for just PTSD in general. So yeah, what is complex PTSD, Don?
So a big difference is with complex PTSD, it's over a longer period of time with repeated events, with repeated traumatic events.
So is that almost like an additive effect? So it's continuous trauma over a prolonged period of time.
Yeah. So an example could be prolonged bullying or physical or sexual abuse, something over a long period of time.
And so typically I think the mind jumps there when you think about developing several years later and these kind of forms of abuse. You talk about bullying, we're conventionally thinking more about children, I'm guessing. Is it usually like child abuse that leads to this complex PTSD?
It is, yes, because
Okay.
it typically occurs during that during childhood over several years.
Yeah.
And then it's carried into adulthood.
I mean, the ages between like 0 and 5 are so important for neurodevelopment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you have multiple negative experiences during that time, it can
Exactly.
have significant long-term effects, can't it, Don?
Yeah.
Can I tell you something really interesting I found while researching this episode?
I would love you to do.
So different genes in your body can be switched on and off by little modifications. So chemicals get basically taken on and off these genes by your body, which acts as like an on-off switch. Just general context. You don't really need to know the details of it. But there's
Epigenetics?
Epigenetics, exactly.
Yeah.
If you're particularly interested in looking at home, and we can talk on the Patreon and on the social media a little bit about what that is if you're particularly interested. But there's a gene called TRPA1, which is associated with sensing mechanical pain, so that pain that's produced by being hit, crushed, pushed, like that kind of physical, something actually manufacturing pain rather than like a temperature or a chemical or anything like that. And there's these two sort of on-switch sites within this gene which are significantly more likely to be switched off in people who have experienced child abuse. And this gene is associated, when you have these on switches on, it means people have a higher pain threshold. And so that's a very confusing way that I've just tried to explain that. Basically, the people who haven't experienced child abuse have these on switches on, and that gives them higher pain thresholds, so they can tolerate more pain. The people who had experienced child abuse had these things switched off, and it made them more vulnerable to pain. It made them have a lower pain threshold. And so it looks like, actually, as well as this PTSD, a kind of link into that later and physiological might actually come from it literally altering our genes.
Yeah. Which is interesting because often you'll hear about people with PTSD and complex PTSD acting more numb or almost paralyzed. So that kind of goes against what you just said there. Yeah. So yeah, it manifests in various ways.
Yeah, I think when we was looking at particularly chronic pain and PTSD, the majority of the research does show that the most common physical problems reported by those with PTSD and complex PTSD is pain. So maybe it is to do with epigenetics, maybe it's to do with the psychology around how your brain has developed from those traumas. I mean, we don't need to go into neuroplasticity or anything like that, but
because I really want to. Just very quickly to touch on that, one of the things that I was reading showed that there's different sites in the brain that are involved in processing pain and involved in altered activity in PTSD. So again, if for any of you particularly interested...
Is it the amygdala by any chance?
The amygdala is one of them. Go on, keep guessing.
Basal ganglia?
Nope.
Hippocampus?
Yeah.
So the amygdala and the hippocampus, that's your memory and your processing of sort of like
Emotion,
and what have you.
And then also prefrontal cortex, anterior cingulate cortex, insula, thalamus, periaqueductal gray, and the
Limbic
locus
system?
coeruleus.
Locus coeruleus. Nice.
So obviously that's just kind of listing areas of the brain, but that is to say there's a lot of crossover in the areas that are activated by chronic pain and they're activated by PTSD. So this link isn't maybe as tangential as you might think it would be.
So do we have like fMRI studies looking at?
We will get onto that later on.
Ooh, lovely.
How prevalent is this sort of generally then, like stepping away from pain again? How common is it for people to have PTSD?
So the studies that look at prevalence of PTSD, it's quite difficult to really interpret the data properly because trauma is such a subjective nature. It's such a subjective sort of experience. What traumatises me may not traumatise you, vice versa. But approximately 70% of the world's population will experience something truly traumatic during their life, of which 5.6% will develop PTSD. So if we're looking at the actual prevalence, it's roughly 3.9% of the global population will experience PTSD at some point in their life.
Interestingly, in the UK, in 2024, 5.7% of adults, so higher than the global average, tested positive for PTSD. And compare that to 10 years before, it was only 4.4%. So actually the prevalence in the UK seems to be going up.
Now, my question is it because we've got better mental health services which are diagnosing more? Is it potentially, 2024, that's post-COVID. Many people experience truly traumatic experiences, losing loved ones, being isolated.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a study on that. We don't have that study, but I wonder
if we do find anything related to that, you'll hear it in the breakdown. Is there anything, Don, about who's more commonly affected by PTSD? So other than, we know that obviously there's the link with pain, but just generally in the population, is there sort of any demographic factors that make you more likely to get PTSD?
So, more women than men screen positive for PTSD, 6.1% compared to 5% respectively. And LGBTQ people are also more than twice as likely to experience PTSD than cisgender or heterosexual people, especially transgender individuals.
Do you know what? This doesn't actually surprise me. And you might be surprised by what I'm about to say, but these are groups of people which experience more abuse in community.
Yeah.
Which
Society.
Society.
More marginalisation. If you look at assault rates, in particularly with transgender people, it's the highest rates of any subgroup. Women more vulnerable to sexual assault.
Yeah.
It's no surprise.
No, there's pretty clear kind of links about why it would be, aren't there? But so obviously we've spoken in previous episodes about the fact that women are more likely to have chronic pain and people in the LGBTQ plus community are more likely to have chronic pain as well.
Did we have a full episode on that?
We did indeed.
Oh, wow.
How many, what percentage of people with chronic pain have PTSD?
So according to the NHS in 2024, 1 in 10 adults with poor physical health screen positive for PTSD. And people with a limiting physical health condition were more likely than those without to report a traumatic event. So that's around 45% of people compared to 30%.
So when you said limiting health condition, are we talking about people with disabilities or are we talking about people with quite severe health conditions?
Typically, I think with limiting health conditions, we're talking about something that limits your activities of daily living. So your abilities to wash, dress, mobilise around the house, to do transfers, so to get in and out of bed, on and off a toilet, on and off a chair, to go to work, to engage in social life, to leave the house. These kind of typical activities that we take for granted a lot of the time. And so if you've got something that limits that, it makes you, like Don says, about 1.5 times more likely to experience a trauma.
Yeah, and about 3 times more likely to screen positive for PTSD.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not surprising really, is it? Because people with chronic pain are exposed to a lot of traumatic life events just as a result of the pain. Like you might have someone, for example, with sickle cell disease, which we've got an episode coming up soon. If you have a sickle cell crisis, that in itself is an extremely traumatic event. If your chronic pain was caused by an accident, for example, if you're in a car crash, that's obviously a hugely traumatic event. If you feel like you've been doctor shopping for years and going and seeing loads and loads of medical professionals and getting nowhere, that in itself is sort of one of those, like Josh says, those more prolonged, episodic traumatic events as well. So it's probably not surprising that this rate is higher in people with chronic pain.
So with that said, what are some conditions that can develop due to this PTSD?
Well, interestingly, research found that those experiencing chronic pain and PTSD were reporting more severe pain and a poorer quality of life than those that only experienced chronic pain. They were also showing more symptoms of depression and were more likely to be diagnosed with alcohol or substance abuse disorders.
And I've actually got the numbers for that from this episode. The paper said that it's 28% of people with PTSD and chronic pain will have an alcohol or substance abuse disorder, compared to just 11% of people with chronic pain alone. So it's like you're...
More than double.
Yeah, 2.5 times more likely to have a dependency issue if you've got PTSD as well. Also as well, there's higher rates of disability in people with both conditions, higher rates of suicidal behaviours. But one of the things I found most interesting was there was this study where they asked people to use a body map, so like basically a cartoon drawing of the front and back of a body, and to highlight where they have pain.
Oh, so it's not a doll.
It's not
with
a doll.
Its eyes
no,
crossed out.
No, it's not point on the doll where it hurts.
A
But
voodoo doll.
they found that in people who have pain and PTSD, they had more of a widespread area of pain. So the average body surface where people experience pain with PTSD and pain was 13.2%, so just over sort of a tenth of your body had pain, compared to only 6.9% in people with just chronic pain alone. So actually, like, the area of your body affected by the pain seems to be bigger, which again, all of this links back to those potential neurological brain mechanisms. Maybe that is what's causing sort of a more widespread pain response rather than like a specific location of the pain.
Interesting.
So as we mentioned earlier, those who suffer from PTSD can often relive their traumatic episodes through nightmares or flashbacks. And this brings us to the theoretical models that help explain the link between PTSD and chronic pain.
Now, Don, being sort of our resident psychology expert, did the research for this part of the episode, and I feel like the names don't necessarily feel like they strike a chord with me. They don't obviously explain what it means, but I think this idea of separating into models, they're really interesting sort of theories as to why there's a link between these things. So Don, do you want to talk to us about the mutual maintenance model, the triple M?
The triple M. So it's like an advert for McDonald's.
I'm in pain.
So we've got the mutual maintenance model, and this suggests that PTSD and chronic pain mutually reinforce each other via a set of shared psychological mechanisms, such as catastrophizing or attentional biases. So this kind of means noticing the pain more often when experiencing a symptom of PTSD or a traumatic episode, such as that hyperarousal, feeling really vigilant, irritability, dizziness, or headaches.
This feels like it ties in quite nicely. I was reading about something called the trauma structure in PTSD, which is like the web of stimuli, of like experiences that cause people to have sort of a reliving episode in PTSD or a triggering episode in PTSD. And so it might be that originally you were in a car crash, like Josh spoke about earlier on. If you were in a car crash, you might find going on a particular road is traumatic, but then you might think that that road is actually the road you used to take to go to the dentist, and now you find going to the dentist traumatic, and then you find toothache traumatic, and this web can kind of spiral a little bit, and people's worlds can shrink as a result. So this mutual maintenance, it can really tie into this idea of hyperarousal around all these different stimuli, and so it can be really difficult to manage, right?
So, like, for example, if you were, if you were in that position of being in that car crash, having a lot of pain associated with the dentist, and you were walking down this road where you had that car crash, the mutual maintenance model would suggest that as you're walking down, you would think about the pain from the dentist, and then you would think about the car crash, and it would just exacerbate both the pain and the trauma.
Wow. Okay. Well, moving on from the is the we've got the shared vulnerability model.
Or the SVM.
SVM. What this model suggests is that PTSD and chronic pain stem from common risk factors such as anxiety sensitivity, which is the belief that symptoms of anxiety can be physically harmful. This is also commonly known as the fear of fear, or as Mark Manson calls it in his book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, the feedback loop from hell.
Quick sidebar here. Don, you're just finishing that book at the minute. Can we have a quick review?
Oh yeah, that's why I included it in this episode, because it was mentioned in there, and I'm currently reading it. Quick review. I think there's a lot of value in the book, and I say that before I completely thrash it, because it is just shit writing. The guy says fuck about every 3 words. Just calm down. And I get the whole point of like it's meant to stand out. It's like really abrasive language to like be a disruptor, blah blah blah. But just take a chill pill. And it's also very like very laddie. It's very male orientated. And some of the things that he's written in there, he's written about it like it's this incredibly like revolutionary idea, and it's not. It's just like there's one point where he's talking about this prince, and he's being really mysterious about it. This prince who grew up having anything that he wanted.
Is it Prince Andrew?
That was completely unplanned.
No, it's not Prince Andrew, thankfully. But this prince was, really sheltered. He got everything he ever wanted, and then he embarked on this journey. And turns out the prince that he was talking about was Buddha. And it's like you didn't really have to cloak it under this mysterious guise. Like we all know who Buddha was.
Speaking about a prince who goes on a journey, it's not about a prince, but someone who goes on a journey and then comes back and has learned nothing. Have you read The Alchemist?
No.
Oh, it's a terrible book.
Been to
But
The
either way.
Alchemist.
Oh, one quick question. What would you give it out of 10 so far?
Okay, I would give it a solid 5.
Okay.
That's good, though.
5's all right, yeah.
I feel like that's made up for our book review, so we won't do that at the end.
Right, okay.
Anyway, back to it.
We've gone
fear
on
of fear.
I told you I read
that
you guys.
feedback loop from hell. The
feedback
fear
loop
of
from
being
hell, yeah.
fearful.
So, anxiety sensitivity is often a precursor or predictor of the occurrence of a panic attack, taking the form of palpitations or dizziness. In other words, having these traumatic episodes can lead to living in this feedback loop from hell, just on a much more intense scale with pain thrown into the mix. So, extra fun.
I guess that's the issue, though, isn't it? Is that if the pain is part of what you're scared of, particularly if your pain isn't, if it's not consistent, if it comes in ebbs and flows and it gets worse, you have flare-ups and stuff, the fear of flaring up feeds into that fear of fear.
Absolutely. The anticipation leads into the anxiety, which then positive feedback loop into more pain.
Exactly. And I guess, well, Don's done a model, Josh has done a model, so why not? I'll take one. The last model to talk about is the perpetual avoidance model.
Pam.
Pamela.
That's an Essex accent. There you go.
Oh my gosh.
Full circle.
You could have just told me Gavin and Stacey.
It's Wales.
What?
Well, yeah, Stacey
Half of that is, yeah.
Yeah. But this model suggests that avoidance behaviour and negative reinforcement lead to individuals avoiding any fear-inducing activities. So that could be reminders of past trauma, or for people living in chronic pain, for example, it might be physical activity. So if you've got someone who maybe has chronic fatigue syndrome as well as pain, they might feel physical activity are going to put them into that, something you'll hear people talk about, post-exertional malaise. And so there's this fear avoidance cycle that builds. So yes, that's not denying that malaise exists, but saying that this can feed into making more and more fear about ever doing anything sort of physically exerting. And so individuals with this might develop avoidance behaviours to prevent any episodes of that PTSD or pain flare-up. But that being said, there's a need for more sort of rigorous longitudinal studies to work out how PTSD and pain are sort of properly connected.
So all that's to say that PTSD combined with chronic pain often leads to a pain trauma cycle. Taking hyperarousal as a symptom of PTSD, for example, this feeling of being on edge or vigilance can often lead to your muscles kind of feeling more tense and therefore muscle pain. and this can become chronic over time.
And so, like, there's examples online about people who recall waking up in agony because they'd had a PTSD nightmare, and so their body had been so tense, they'd woken up and they'd found that they'd been so tense that their wrists and ankles had been in a weird position, and they'd wake up with lots of pain. And actually, harking back to our episode on post-stroke pain, we spoke about tone, and those of you who are on the Patreon will have seen a little breakdown about tone as well. If you've got that sort of higher amount of tension, if your body's in that really stressed position because of that nightmare, it's really understandable that you're going to end up with that pain. So go back and listen to that episode if you haven't already.
Please do. So another kind of more biochemical link to with PTSD to pain is that cortisol levels can really vary due to PTSD. So if your cortisol levels are really, really high because of the stress that you're experiencing, this can deplete your adrenal glands, which in turn raises the level of prolactin, and therefore your sensitivity to pain increases. Many people suffering from PTSD find that they're unable to exercise as much as they'd like because of this. But then again, the lack of movement can lead to more muscle and body pains over time.
One last thing to touch on before we perhaps think about like how this can be treated. There was a study of American twins, and it looked at PTSD and its heritability, so its sort of genetic link. And this study basically found that 43% of PTSD can be attributed to genetics. So the statistical analysis as to how they work this out, I'm not going to go into. One, because it would take too long to explain, and two, because my knowledge of statistics isn't good enough. But actually, there's a big genetic component as well that makes you more vulnerable. So if you've got a first-degree relative, so parent, sibling, etc., that has PTSD, there actually appears to be a link that makes you yourself more likely to develop it.
Generational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Okay, so shall we move on to the treatment? So there's research that shows that clinicians can often treat one condition before the other, often failing to recognize the other condition or dismissing it because of just not exploring the symptoms sufficiently, I guess. But this is obviously counterproductive. So if you believe that you have both PTSD and chronic pain due to the symptoms that we mentioned earlier, it's best to explain this to your doctor to ensure that you get the most appropriate diagnosis and treatment. This may be difficult depending on where you're based, as you may have to work with different healthcare providers or different health teams to manage each problem separately, but hopefully this is something that will continue to improve.
Yeah, and I mean, there's studies looking at parallel treatment for people with PTSD and pain, and they basically said the most common psychological therapies used in each one have attrition rates, so a dropout rate of 50% in PTSD and 20% in chronic pain. So if you consider, let me try and do the quick maths on this, and Josh can maybe, as statistics king, 40%?
Say that again, sorry.
If you had 50% dropout and a 20% dropout in the population, that would leave you with a 40% dropout, wouldn't it? 20% of 50%. Say that you treated the PTSD first and you had a 50% dropout, and then you had a 20% dropout of the remaining 50%, you'd have 40 people. 40%.
You would.
Right, fabulous. So that would leave you with only 40% of people actually making it through that parallel treatment cycle. So obviously a parallel approach would probably be preferable as opposed to a sequential approach, because people just end up getting, I think, lost in the system. And so one of the theories behind the treatment of PTSD, and that can actually be applied to pain, is prolonged exposure. And this basically aims to help trauma survivors to approach trauma memories and triggers. Now, this can be done both using imagination, so trying to get people to visualize things, or it can be done using actual real-life stimulus. So say that you have a trauma from a car crash. We keep on coming back to this example, but maybe it feels traumatic for you to see the type of car that crashed into you. And so showing people pictures of that and trying to do it in a setting where people feel safe and comfortable, that's these ideas behind the prolonged exposure approach to managing PTSD.
That's a really good point, Joe, and that kind of trauma-focused therapy has also been used for improving pain-related functioning in chronic pain. So it's up to our healthcare providers to kind of revise the integration of this treatment that's offered.
And give something, I guess, a bit more holistic in
Yeah.
what they're trying to do. Because speaking about that kind of trauma network that we spoke about earlier on, this idea of all the different things that can trigger an episode of PTSD, sort of flashbacks or reliving, very similar things happen in chronic pain as well. Like, I think that obviously some of them aren't necessarily things that you can control, but I mean, like, weather changes, and maybe if you know that your pain gets worse when it's really cold and humid, maybe if you look at the weather forecast and you know it's going to be cold and humid, your body's kind of already in that preparation state where it feels like pain is going to come, and so maybe it's then harder for you to manage that episode.
Priming you almost.
Exactly. And so having this kind of trauma-focused therapy to remove these triggers might actually help to prevent those flare-ups of pain.
So, NICE, or the National Institute of Health and Clinical Excellence in the UK, updated their guide in 2018 to recommend trauma-focused psychological treatments of PTSD in adults, specifically the use of eye movement desensitization reprocessing, or EMDR.
EMDR.
Yeah, and CBT, which we've already talked about.
And Don basically gave me a breakdown before this episode of what EMDR is and how it works, and it is unbelievably interesting. The concept sounds utterly mental, but actually the science behind it is super interesting.
EMDR, it's really, really interesting. How it works is you kind of get the patient or the individual to focus on something that's being moved side to side, like a pencil or a light on a screen or something like that. And this will then replicate your eye movement whilst you're in your REM sleep cycle. And this part of the sleep cycle is really important when it comes to emotional regulation and memory consolidation. And so what the aim is, by replicating these conditions where your eyes are moving side to side and kind of putting you into that REM state, it's kind of reframing those memories so that you can unlearn that pain associated with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's just mad, isn't it, that someone's come up with that idea, like the fact that there's really good evidence base behind it, but actually it's like, you know, when magicians are like, follow this pen, follow the pen, keep your eyes.
Look in the eyes, not around there, it's not around there, you're under. Cured.
But genuinely, like, just saying, like, go on, follow this pen, and now let's talk about your most traumatic memories. It sounds so, like, mad, but it seems to work.
Also, I just find it crazy that they tested this out on mice. How do
they?
you even do that?
Tell me about your most traumatic experience.
There was no cheese in the trap.
God. But also, sorry, as well as EMDR, you also just touched on CBT, and I know, Don, that this is something that you've seen from sort of a professional side as well.
Yeah, I will always say CBT is great. It's the most researched treatment there is, therapy there is at the moment, but it's not necessarily for everyone. So if your healthcare provider is recommending that for you, just do your own research. But with that said, CBT is commonly used, especially within talking therapies, to treat not only chronic pain but also PTSD. Another really common treatment is ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. But there is a new one that's emerging called pain reprocessing theory. And when I was kind of going through these, doing my research about them, it was kind of funny because they talk about these treatments, you know, really clinically, but as I was reading it, I just thought this kind of relates a lot to how in Eastern medicine, particularly in like India, they talk about chakras. And so I'll just go through the kind of brief descriptions of these three treatments, and then hopefully you see what I'm seeing. So CBT aims to eliminate the negative thoughts and behaviors associated with pain or exacerbating pain. And ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy aims to acknowledge the pain and accept it for what it is, whereas PRT, pain reprocessing therapy, kind of aims to unlearn the pain by helping individuals perceive their pain signals from the brain as less threatening, because after all, the brain's main function is like survival and efficiency. So by making that pain signal less threatening, it's kind of reframing it. And I just thought that sounded like you were unlocking different chakras in your soul, in your essence, or whatever. Like you go through stages of this treatment where, at first you're eliminating negative thoughts and behaviors, and secondly you're accepting
them. Yeah, okay.
And then thirdly you're relearning. It just felt really,
I like that.
mystical, but from a very clinical perspective.
Yeah. I was made back in my pain journey, which I'm still on, but I now kind of detached a little bit from the healthcare system in that I just manage my own condition. But when I was under a pain management team, I got made to do a psychological pain management program before they would sort of discuss any other treatment options with me. And it was like a group program. It was 8 weeks long. It was 3 hours every Friday morning. And one of the things that they did was, I think I spoke about this on the podcast before, is it was like, imagine that your pain's a colour and choose the colour of your pain and imagine where it's flowing in your body, and then you're going to imagine that colour like flowing out of you. But the person doing it, her accent was just so funny when she was doing it. I couldn't keep a straight face. And she'd be like, and I want you all to relax. You're going to breathe softly, soothingly. It was just like having a thick monk accent is just not what I need when I'm trying to like have an open mind and stuff. And I wasn't particularly like keen for this in the first place. I'm gonna like, imagine your pain's a colour and it's flowing out of you soothingly.
Have you ever seen the show Plebs?
Oh yeah, Plebs is great.
Oh yeah.
That reminded me of what's his name?
Grumio.
Grumio. Romeo? No. Grumio.
Net him.
Ghibli.
Fucking
Net him. Got the bastard.
If you haven't watched Plebs, go and watch the
fantastic
Gladiator
show.
episode. It's great.
Alve Grumio.
Salve Grumio.
Salve. Alve, true to Kaiser.
But I think sort of from this episode you can see, hopefully, that this link between PTSD and chronic pain, it's not just people happen to get both. There are really kind of clear biological and psychological links between them, and there's obvious reasons why people would develop both. And hopefully you've seen a little bit about how trying to target both conditions at the same time when you're treating it is probably going to be the most beneficial way to manage it. But you might feel in this episode maybe that we've not come to sort of obvious conclusions about how we can really change this. We spoke about some of these treatments and how they work for some and not for others. And that isn't because we haven't done the research or don't want to share it with you. It's because at the minute, sort of this link between the two conditions and the understanding of how to treat it is still very much in its early days.
Yeah, like I just mentioned PRT as a form of treatment. It's not been researched enough. That's one of the main downsides of it. It's very, very new. And the results that they've got are fairly small, but very successful. So there was a study done at the University of Colorado with 150 odd participants, where they measured
150 odd participants.
Odd, very strange participants. I think it was 151 participants, where they measured their pain levels before the study and then 4 weeks after receiving PRT treatment, and the results were really, really good. The fMRI scans from the experiment revealed that people who received PRT had substantial reductions in brain activity across several regions associated with pain processing after the treatment, so after the 4 weeks.
Sorry, I was just thinking how funny it would have been if I'd edited that to say they had significantly reduced brain activity in multiple areas, including speech, motor function, inhibition. It is really interesting though, and clearly like that it's doing its job biologically. So.
Yeah, indeed.
So hopefully, this can come to us in the UK.
And so I think we've done a fairly decent overview there, guys.
Hats on the back to us.
Yeah. As always, though, in this sort of long-form sort of podcast, we can't really cover absolutely everything. We'll be here for hours and hours. So, for example, if you have PTSD and you feel like we've missed something really important, please feel free to reach out to us and tell us what we've missed.
Yeah, but you can get us on social media at paininthepodcass. You can email us at paininthepodcass@gmail.com. We're always very happy to hear what people have to say. If you think there's stuff we have to share, or if there's questions that you want to ask. The caveat Josh will always say, so I'll say it in advance for him, we can't offer medical advice. We are not your doctor, we're not your healthcare professionals, but we'd be very happy to discuss what we found and try and help you better understand your experience or the experience of others around you.
I'm a doctor, I'm not your doctor.
Whoa, that's quite good. And as always, if there's anything that we've said that you don't necessarily agree with or think is wrong, let us know, because that makes our job for the breakdown episodes a lot easier.
Very true indeed.
And one thing I would like to give a little shout out for is
Pepe chicken. It's really nice.
Please sponsor us.
Is Dr. Ravindran's podcast on chronic pain called Pain Speak, which is where I actually found out about PRT.
Amazing.
So a lot of good information there. Go check it out if you want to. And one more thing from me is, I don't know if I've actually said this, but I probably have. I know I've joked about it before, but...
We know you're gay.
Yes. PTSD. No, I have joked about the TV show The Bear.
Oh, yeah.
Because I really cannot bring myself to watch it. It is it's a very minor form of PTSD.
You find it very triggering.
From my days of being a chef. I don't know why, but I've heard it's a lovely show. But yeah, so if I've said that before on the podcast and you didn't quite agree with it, I apologize, I guess.
But to be fair, I from doing the PhD, when I went to visit like colleagues in the lab after I'd finished, when I went back to see them for a coffee in the cafe in the building, I immediately felt my heart rate go up. I don't know, I'm not claiming I have PTSD, but I think there are real trauma responses, and something
hyper-arousal.
Was definitely distressed.
I watch a lot of like medical dramas, like ER, House, The Pit, for example, and every modern show always has a COVID episode, and it always sort of like, I hate them. Just hate them. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish the whole world just had a blip and we just all forgot about COVID.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's brought us nicely to the end of this episode. We've been rambling for a good while now. So from me, Dr. Joshua Crow, it's goodbye.
From me, Don, ciao.
And from me, Joe, also ciao.
See ya.